Hey everybody, and welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and the finale of our series, the Unported playlist, where we take a look at 10 of my favorite unported arcade games, and of course we're closing out with Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder, the most why the hell did they not port this game in the history of arcade games. It was released in 1992 by Sega on the Sega 32 platform, and it's not like Sega had a really powerful 2D console they could have ported this to in, 95, 96, something called the Sega Saturn that even if it was short on RAM, had a RAM expansion cartridge to make these arcade ports perfect. Obviously, they should have ported it to the Saturn. I don't know what Sega was thinking. They even ported Golden Axe The Duel, the 2D fighting game, to the Saturn, because apparently they thought that was something that the audiences wanted versus The Revenge of Death Adder. And this is just the poster child for why would you not port this game over. It was super popular in arcades. People loved it. You had 3 games in the franchise before this that were on home consoles. Every other game in the Golden Axe series has come home except this one. And this one, you can burn someone's face off. And I just had to show that really early in the game, even though those enemies are easy to beat. I wanted to get that right out of the way, that the special magic attacks in this are just absolutely outstanding, as well as the animations. I just got bonked on the head, and I made a little spin move and fell onto the ground. But this game is, as far as beat 'em up's concerned, basically perfect. It is a beloved game that's gotten talked about by many people before me, and I almost thought about not talking about it because it has been talked to death, but really, considering it is one of my favorite games, and I played the crap out of this in arcades at my local arcade, the Dream Machine in Vermont growing up, I definitely had to talk about it. Weirdly enough, it was also one of my father's favorite arcade games, and we played through this game together, and that's one of those memories I have. Just like I watched him beat Dragon's Lair in 1/4 because he remembered everything from being a kid, that it's just not only an incredible game, but as far as my gaming history is concerned, I have a lot of fond memories of it. But now that we've gotten through the first little mini-boss here, you get a lot of interesting scrolling here. We're going into the background and everything's coming larger, and it definitely has that sort of ability, hardware-wise, to kind of just play around with what the sprites look like. And these damn gnomes, still to this day, I'm not very good at hitting them. They didn't want you to hit them, but I'm particularly bad at it. We even get a little bit of a light transition. We've gone from, midday to sunset. And as far as the look of the game's concerned, it is some of the best 2D artwork that Sega, I think, ever did. They always loved the Golden Axe series, and they were always great at making the games for it. But this game in particular feels like a lot of love and attention was put into it. You can pull chains and release those hostages there, and then you're going to get some more of those magical potions. As far as the gameplay is concerned, it is your traditional beat-em-up game, so the gameplay is not going to be deep. You have your attacks, you have your magic, you have a couple different characters, but I played with Stern the entire time because when I think of Golden Axe, I think of the barbarian character. That's just how I play. But again, I just love watching that face burn off. And there's a ton of detail in the background. Everything's drawn really well. Everything's animated really well. The sound effects are great. The music's great. Sega did an outstanding job on making this game. And that's why I don't understand why they never thought that we should port it to home console so people could actually enjoy it. And that's just, I don't get it. That's Sega. That's classically what they did. But as far as the boss fights here concerned, if you can get onto that scorpion, and you will see very shortly I do, you can get the boss stun locked, and you can just basically tear through him with that scorpion. We'll turn around and deal with that little scrub enemy there, but you will see if you time your attacks correctly as he stands up, you can stun lock him, and you can make at least the first boss of the Revenge of Death Adder a complete non-experience. And, that's kind of general in some arcade games anyway, where you can stun lock the bosses. And now in classic Golden Axe faction, we have the gnomes here that we can hit. I get a few hits in on them. I can definitely do better than this, but again, if you trap them, you can get enough potions to be able to go ahead and use some of your more magical attacks. And I do appreciate that. Especially the fact that you still have those steeds that you can ride on. You've got praying mantises, things like that. And you get this nice little transition from stage to stage where you get this interactive map. And it just goes to just further cement how much love and attention was put into this game. What I'll let you do now is I'm going to let you watch most of Scene 2 from start to finish without me talking so you can get a good idea of what you can hear and what you can see. We went up and you have branching paths in the game, but enjoy the soundtrack, enjoy the music, and I'll be back in a minute to keep talking about The Revenge of Death Adder. I swear the Scorpion here has the worst horizontal leap in any arcade game. I'm shocked he made it over there and the enemy fell right into the pit. But there are some areas where there's some risk and reward going on. There's 2 magical potions in there, and there's a skeleton enemy, so you need to decide at certain points in time, is it worth rescuing the hostages? Is it worth getting those potions? Or if you're low on health and want to just keep going and moving forward, should you just ignore all of it and continue moving on? And I appreciate that of the game. It kind of gives you some options to play, even though it's a very linear game. There's a couple branching paths, but otherwise it's a beat 'em up, and there isn't a lot option-wise to do. But I do like in this stage that they play around with the light and the dark theme, where you can pull switches and turn the lights on, or you can fight without the lights on. I think that's just a really nice touch. Now I think this game would have looked absolutely incredible on the Sega Saturn, because the Saturn was set up to be a 2D powerhouse, and it was developed well after this game came out, so porting it would have been no issue whatsoever. I would assume it would have fit on the standard ROM that the Saturn had, but obviously they had ROM expansion carts in Japan, and this could have been something that they could have released in the US as well with an expansion cart, because I think people definitely would have paid a little bit of extra money to be able to experience this game at home. And that's just the thing about this entire series in general, is I don't understand why any of these games weren't ported home, whether it's Daytona 2, whether it's Scud Race, whether it's something like The Revenge of Death Adder. Sega in particular has a theme in this playlist, which was they had the hardware to port incredible arcade games home, they had developed it, but yet they just decided, you know what, forget it, we'll just leave it in arcades, we're not going to try to sell our own properties. And that's why I talk about Golden Axe The Duel coming out on the Saturn, is that they were porting Golden Axe games to the platform. They just decided that Death Adder was one of those games that they didn't want to be bothered with porting. I think they could have just, if they didn't have the manpower, if they didn't have the bandwidth to do it in-house, they could have given it to a third-party developer, given them the source code and the assets, and had them assemble it. But as far as emulating this game is concerned, it's super easy. The entire game is like, I think, maybe 8 megabytes when I downloaded it, and getting it into an emulator and running it takes about 5 minutes in total. So there is no reason not to experience this game just because you don't own the arcade PCB. And this is one of those expensive games where I think I might, at some point in time, if I get a good offer on it, buy it for my own personal collection and put it in a cabinet, because it's such an outstanding game that I think it's probably worth the money. I like these little interlude scenes here where different power-ups start showing up on the tables and you have to attack them quick enough to get them, but it kind of definitely tricks you into missing as many as you possibly can. But now we're fighting this ogre here, and we're doing it while we're scaling into the background, and that's just a nice little touch, and I think that Sega definitely was playing around with the System 32 hardware just to see how they could kind of incorporate a quasi 3D element into the system, you know, with all these different sprites scaling into the foreground while the background comes closer, and that's something that the Saturn was super capable at doing, all those different transformations of sprite-based elements, that I would have assumed that, like, this could have been a launch game for the Saturn, right alongside Daytona, and I think people would have definitely bought it. Now I understand there was some resistance back then to wanting to have 3D experiences. I mean, Sony with the PlayStation was the #1 enemy of that, where they didn't want 2D games, but Sega did a lot better of giving us those 2D games, but even then maybe as a, you know, system launch game, they thought that this wouldn't be as big of a seller as they were hoping for. But short of that, that is Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder. If you enjoyed it, go down below, hit like and subscribe. We hope you enjoyed the entire series of the Unported playlist, and we may do a part 2, because trust me, there's another 10 games I'd love to talk about. Short of that, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back on Tuesday with another entry in our mainline series, on Friday with a video, and on Sunday we'll have an entirely new series for you guys to watch. But thanks so much, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.